Hey everyone, I've been meaning to Periscope about this for the last week, but things have just been hectic. We've had all the kids over the weekend, and I am just now having a chance to discuss this. So, if you know me, or if you've been following me, and if you don't know, now you're going to know, I was adopted, and I was born in Korea, and I came over to the United States when I was 9.5 months old. Growing up, I didn't have any support at all from the people who adopted me, meaning I really didn't get a lot of questions answered that I had, and it was kind of a taboo subject when people would bring up to my parents or me in front of them saying things like, oh, are you adopted? Because it was pretty obvious I'm Korean and they were white. We look nothing alike. There was always questions, oh, well, what is it like being adopted? Do you want to find your birth parents? Question after question. And people, they're just curious. In some ways it's intrusive because people who are being raised by their biological parents don't get those questions asked to them. But it was always shushed, and my mom taught me at a very early age to tell people it's none of your business. That's our private life. So there was a lot of things that I just grew up realizing that it was not something acceptable to talk about. I wasn't around other Korean adoptees. I wasn't around any other adoptees. We lived a really, private, tight-knit, little life. So I don't, that's all I knew. And as an adult, I found that I would just say things like, oh, I don't know. I don't think I want to know. And then the older I got, I started realizing, well, is it really that I don't want to find my birth parents? Or is it the fact that I was just conditioned to think that? Because I remember at a very young age, my mom was obsessed with the show Unsolved Mysteries. But if the episode that was on was about an adoptee looking for or finding their birth parents, it was like, turn it off, don't let me have these ideas. So it wasn't something that was supported. It wasn't until probably, 2013 when I decided to start kind of digging into my adoption and finding out who I am. And it really wasn't because of the fact that I consciously was saying I want to know about myself. It was the fact that I had been estranged from the people who adopted me since 2008. I was trying to, for the second time, get a passport, and they were making it absolutely impossible, not letting me have my naturalization certificate. So I had to do all this legwork, and I kept contacting them over and over and over and over again, begging for them to just give me the document. There was a lot of lies there. That's a whole different story. So anyways, I contacted all these different agencies through South Korea. I contacted the county where my adoption supposedly took place, all these different things. Finally, I was able to figure out how to get around it and how to get a new copy of my naturalization certificate to get my passport. But literally, this took from January of 2013 till the end of October. Around, I think, November is whenever the people who adopted me sent this little file of all these copies of documents that had to do with my adoption. But it was really funny. There was a lot of things left out about, my actual adoption, the certified copy of my adoption, who the adoption agency was. It was, you could tell things were missing, but it was really strange. And I tapped into that and thought a lot about it, that, once they sent me this envelope with this file folder, and it's here in this office, full of all these papers, I opened it up, read this letter that was written by my adopted father, and it was real shitty, which is usually the type of communication I had with them. So I wasn't shocked, but I didn't actually start digging through the file until weeks later. And I remember my husband Ryan went to open up and look at it. He was just curious, and I was like, stop, don't. I'm like, I realized right then there was some feeling there that I didn't recognize. But when I opened it up, it was hard. And I remember I at this point, I've come a long ways since November of 2013, but I had such emotions that were just closed up. And I remember sitting there fighting back tears because it was just depressing to realize that my life was deduced to this little file of papers. That was it. And as I kept digging into my adoption, you know, it was harder and harder and harder. And it ended up making me slip into, or I allowed it to make me slip into a very deep, deep, dark depression, which is something I've been fighting since I was a child. And when I finally decided to start doing something about it and acknowledging my feelings, that I do want to know something about myself, and a lot of this stuff has held me back, it caused a lot of relationship and attachment issues. I joined a bunch of Korean adoptee groups on Facebook, and it was so helpful in the beginning because all these people, you know, were feeling the same way I did. And if you're a Korean adoptee, I'd love to hear from you, because I've never been around Korean adoptees or adoptees, like I said, and I just want to know how I'm feeling, and it's great. But I was realizing that I wasn't the only one who felt like kind of an outcast in the American society. And also, really, I couldn't relate to the Korean society, and I look Korean. And, there was things about me that I was always set apart, because obviously, like I said, I looked nothing like the people who were raising me, that I went everywhere with, until I left home at 15. And then, there was introductories that people, I don't think they realize, but if you are an parent who's adopting or has adopted a child, be cognizant of these type of things. I remember it was the thing like, this is Dave and Luana and their adopted daughter Mindy, and there was things like that my parents would say, we love you like you're our very own. Well, unless you've had a child of your own, you really don't know that. I'm sure they were loving me the best that they could, but there was always a difference. And, so I realized I felt very similar to other people, but then I found out through the groups that there was this 23andMe DNA kit, and I was able to take this DNA kit, and basically you had to fill up this vial about this big full of your spit. It was quite a fiasco, but I did that, and about 5 weeks later, I was actually able to get this analysis. And I know that there's so much more with the 23andMe kits that you can figure out about yourself and your blood types and all these things. But for me, I just wanted to know what I was, because I looked in the mirror and I saw an Asian person, but I didn't know anything. There were so many things and I think anybody can realize this in life, that if you don't know certain things, your mind wanders and you just fill in the gaps with assumptions and stories. And, as a child, I had these philosophies of what came about that led to my being put up for adoption and all this and that, and who my birth father was. And, I was filling in all these blanks. And that's what I think people as a whole do. If you don't know something, you just come to your own conclusions. And so one of the biggest things was I wanted to know exactly what I was. I just so desperately wanted to be white because I wanted to fit into this society that I'd been living in, for 3 decades. Well, come to find out, I am Korean, Japanese, and Chinese. So I'm like, okay, mystery solved. So I thought, oh, that's great. But you know what? I realized that there was so much more that was missing, and it led to a deep, deep, dark depression, which I've shared over and over and over again, and I'm still in recovery mode. And we talked about this last Thursday in my therapy session, and so I'm going to be sharing more about this on Periscope and on YouTube and my Facebook. But I was just kind of wondering, how many of you out there are adopted, and how many of you are, Asian or Korean adoptees, what your story's been like. And if you ever feel like you kind of have a loss of identity because you don't know anything about yourself, to know that you are basically, your information is a stack of papers, not knowing anybody that you're related to other than if you have children, which that was, a totally different experience for me to have blood relatives. I finally have 3 blood relatives, which are my children, just like me. But it was weird, and a lot of people will take that for granted if they have siblings or cousins they grew up with, or they look or talk or sound like they're whoever their parents are, or their aunts or uncles. This is a new thing to me, so I'm experiencing it. But I'm trying to recover, because I realized that a lot of my depression, my anxiety, my past drug and alcohol use was me filling in the gaps in my life, and trying to find my identity, trying to figure out who I was. And I know that people say all the time, and I say this, that we create our destiny, and that what happened in our past doesn't define us. And I do have a huge support network with friends and family, but wanting to know about yourself and about your history, especially as a mom going to the doctor, every time I've had a child was, asking all these questions and knowing nothing about yourself really sucks. It's a big question mark. I went to a chiropractor a while back and they're asking about my medical history, and it was like, oh, well, I'm adopted, I don't know. And they're like, oh, and I don't like that being adopted is part of my identity. It is, so I accept it, but it just kind of stinks, So I would just love to hear from you if you're adopted, and I just wanted to share my story and kind of get those feelings off my chest. And hopefully as I go on through therapy, hopefully I will be able to really identify my feelings and kind of put that part to bed and have some closure to it and be able to understand that it's hard to know things about yourself that are genetically there or that are just ingrained in you, that I didn't realize until I had children, remarried, and I have stepchildren. I see how people have influences on the children that they're around, or children are influenced by the adults they're around, however you want to look at it, and I remember hearing things all growing up that, Mindy, we don't understand why you're like this. We didn't raise you that way. And I'm just like, I don't know why I'm this way either. I just am. And as a child, you can't explain that. But it was, now I realize it's like, I would love to be around the people that brought me into this existence, even if they didn't want me, or even if, whatever, just to kind of see the mannerisms, the facial expressions, the likes and dislikes, the way our voices are, what we look like, it sucks having to just guess, and I mean, and I understand that you don't even have to be adopted. There's a lot of people out there who have been brought into this world and never got to meet their birth mother or father. So, I think that whether you're adopted or not, you can probably relate with me, but I hope that, you're not like me and wait 30 years to finally figure out your feelings and see how much it's really affected you. But I will say, I try to keep a positive outlook on everything, and realizing what an impact it's had on me has really helped me become a better parent. And I am blessed that I get to be a mom and that I get to experience having blood relatives. Like I said, so many people take it for granted, but for me, it's pretty amazing to look at myself and look at my children and realize that we look a lot alike and we walk and talk like, Haley and I, and, there's little mannerisms between Emily and Rebel that I see that they're so much a lot alike, and they look a lot alike when they were babies, and, I never got to experience that. And so, if you do have family members or, siblings or cousins or something like that, really appreciate that, especially if you guys are close, because not everybody gets to experience that. And that's some things that only children don't get to experience either. But, I think that my message to you is that no matter what happens in life, even if it's kind of sucky, even if it's left a bad impression on you or changed you, or made you feel lost at one point, there's always a silver lining. And so find whatever it is that you're going through, find a way to be grateful. And if you're feeling something that just doesn't feel good, find other people out there who have experienced the same thing and have survived and can give you tips. That's kind of why I'm talking about this, is like, I'd love to hear how this has affected other people. And I know that I'm not the only one out there who feels this way. So I kind of want to know how you dealt with it, how you managed life. For me, therapy is the number one thing that has helped me. I'm going to continue. I am going to go to therapy for the rest of my life. It's going to make me better. It's going to help me get through the rough patches that just happen to everybody in life, and help me make peace with the crappy things that have happened. So anyways, that's my rambling for the day. If you are a Korean adoptee, I'd love to hear from you. If you've been adopted, if you are adopting, I'd love to hear from you as well. Thank you for listening, and stay tuned for more Periscopes in the future as I continue my therapy and continue my journey to just loving myself and loving my family. Have a wonderful day.